Story 1. The internet literally connects the world. You and I are talking now because of it. That's incredible. Story 2. Cameras. How can a device capture a scene and freeze it in a miniature version for me to look upon later? Story 3. Magnetic resonance imaging machines, or MRI machines, operate in a fascinating way that may not align with common assumptions. In essence, they utilize a strong magnetic field to align the protons in the water molecules of your body. Subsequently, radio waves are applied to temporarily disrupt this alignment. As the protons realign, they emit radio waves that the machine detects and uses to create detailed images of the interior of your body. For an expert, this process may be straightforward, but as someone with a casual interest, I find it remarkable. Story 4. Harnessing different frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum is essential. Everything from phone calls to Wi-Fi operates using radio waves, which allow us to transmit information by getting things to vibrate at specific frequencies. It is fascinating that radio waves are pervasive and do not interfere with our daily lives. Story 5. Penicillin, discovered accidentally, became a major disease killer and has saved countless lives. Story 6. Planes. How does a giant hunk of metal float? I don't know much about planes, so it truly amazes me. Story 7. Language is fascinating. The fact that vibrating air, in the form of tiny pressure waves, can be shaped by our mouths into symbols that convey basic needs like food and safety, as well as abstract ideas such as justice, love, eternity, and quantum mechanics, is remarkable when you think about it. Language transforms invisible thoughts into something portable, enabling humans to create everything we now take for granted. Story 8. Bread. Who figured out that grinding grain and allowing yeast to do its work would be beneficial? Beer 2. Story 9. Aircraft transport large amounts of metal and carry heavy loads like luggage and passengers, ascending a mile into the air to cross vast oceans. They complete journeys that once took our ancestors generations in just a matter of hours. I studied aerospace engineering. The more I learned about the physics involved, the more absurd the arrogance of humanity seemed in achieving this. While flight obeys the laws of physics, if it were depicted in a fantasy setting, it would likely be criticized for having contrived physical laws that barely allow for flight. Story 10. MicroSD cards amaze me. The fact that you can store 512 gigabytes on something the size of your fingernail feels like proof that we are living in a simulation. Story 11. Global positioning system is like magic. There is no way that should work, but it does. There is no way it should be accessible, but it is. There is no way it should be so easy that my 85-year-old mother can use it, but she does. Story 12. As far as we know, we are the first species to make and use fire, marking the beginning of human advancement in my opinion. Story 13. Air conditioning. Yes, there is the internet and airplanes, but when it's extremely hot or cold, you'd wish you were in a place that is fairly dry and at a temperature between 18 and 24 degrees Celsius. Story 14. Cell phones. I am sitting here typing on a device that can access nearly all of humanity's knowledge, both correct and incorrect. It can show me my grandmother live from across the world while we see and talk to each other, can purchase products for me, can take pictures and videos. These capabilities are remarkable, and they have become an everyday object now. Story 15. Microchips are essentially a collection of switches that flip on and off in a specific order, resulting in various computations and functions. Story 16. The combination of infrastructure and technology allows me to have pressurized hot water in my house for baths and showers. How rare was that 300 years ago? Only nobility and those near hot springs had that, and it required servants for baths, let alone a shower. Story 17. Nuclear power involves using rocks that can be heated to generate steam for boiling water. Story 18. Wheels. I was well into my 20s before I saw a suitcase with wheels. I watched my neighbors haul groceries in from their cars using foldable wheeled wagons, and it made so much sense. We used to buy plastic handles to slip our grocery bags onto, so they wouldn't cut into our hands while we strained our joints carrying them. Wheels. They've been there all along. Why weren't we using them? Story 19. The treatment for HIV has evolved significantly. We went from millions of people dying in the 1980s and 1990s to individuals being able to live long lives with the condition in less than 20 years. Story 20. Chocolate, the steps between what grows on trees and what I spread on my bread are quite complex. Story 21. Vaccines are incredible. It's truly astonishing that we developed them in the first place. Story 22. Honestly, everything, that's not an insincere answer. We are just animals, yet look at how we live. Story 23. Healthcare. I remember watching a video of someone discussing the discovery of human remains with a healed femur, which serves as evidence of early community and society. They could have allowed the individual to die but chose to care for and nurture them instead. Story 24. For me, it's urban cities. How do we manage to fit buildings, pipes, streets, electricity, and so much more into one space, and somehow it all works in harmony? Story 25. How soap was discovered and then perfected through experimentation over 2,000 years ago is amazing to me. Glass is another significant development. It has a long history, and the fact that we wouldn't have phones, televisions, or the internet without it is fascinating. Story 26. Coffee is fascinating to see how it is made. It is not a progressive invention like machines or other things that have improved with technology and money. Someone dedicated significant effort to invent the coffee we enjoy. Story 27. The grocery store is a building that contains various types of meat, bread, and fresh vegetables. You don't have to hunt for food or wait for it to grow. The grocery store serves as a barometer of civilization. If they were to disappear tomorrow, most people would struggle significantly. Story 28. Planes always amaze me. I can look out the window the entire flight, completely mesmerized. Feels like true magic. Story 29. Everything is fascinating. For instance, I am sitting here looking at my cat's autofeeder. It is made of inexpensive plastic on the outside, except for the bowl, which is immaculate stainless steel. Both materials are small miracles in their own ways. It features a quartz oscillation timepiece that would have been the most accurate clock in the world 100 years ago. It likely has more processing power than the technology used during the first moon landing. It is plugged into the wall, which connects to the marvel of our electrical grid. The indicator light is a white LED that won Shuji Nakamura a Nobel Prize in 2014. All of this is simply because I am too lazy to feed my cat a few times a day. Story 30. Some of our medical techniques don't have perfect eyesight. Allow me to use lasers to correct it. Have cancer? I can utilize powerful magnets to create detailed images of your insides without causing harm, and then I will target the cancer with radiation therapy. Lost an arm? I can create a prosthetic that is controlled by your thoughts. Need a new heart valve? I can access it through a vein in your leg. Story 31. Transistors. Not only did we discover how to make and use them, but we also figured out how to put millions of them on a single silicon chip, making them incredibly small, fast, and dense. What truly amazes me is that the transistor is the single most manufactured item humans have created. Story 32. Antipsychotics. You mean to tell me that the little pill I take every morning, Abilify, is the only thing standing between me and my schizophrenia? That I would be back in a terribly dark place if it weren't for this little package of chemicals? It's incredible. I think about it every morning when I take it. Story 33. The one thing that truly baffles me is how humans found this intangible, invisible, and ever-present radiation that permeates every inch of existence. The first thing we thought to do with it was fill it with voices and sounds that we found beautiful. We discovered heaven, and we used it to sing. Also, airplanes are fascinating. Story 34. Magnetic resonance imaging machines. My favorite aspect is that the explanation of how they work involving magnets only raises more questions. Story 35. The God of the Bible, the God of religion. I still can't believe that humans could invent something so utterly nonsensical and believe it. Story 36. Radio. People just figured out how to transmit things through the air. Then television enhanced the experience. The picture and sound traveled to antennas, and it progressed to cable. It's incredible. Story 37. Paracetamol, also known as acetaminophen, is sold under the brand names Panadol and Tylenol. It was first synthesized in 1852. The history of its development reveals the curiosity of scientists who experimented with chemicals to observe their effects on humans. I don't understand much about chemistry, which makes these scientists seem like wizards to me. Story 38. Global Positioning System. Everything about it is fascinating. There is a lot of science, mathematics, engineering, and physics involved. The satellites, the speed of light, relativity, and the calculations to account for it all enable your phone to inform you when you have missed your exit. Story 39. I have a 4-year-old OLED phone. The picture quality on it still amazes me. The camera documents my life in high definition, and I've taken pictures of everything from my family to galaxies. It serves as my television and movie theater. It has access to nearly every song I've ever heard. It shows my exact location on a 3-dimensional map that streams to my car screen wirelessly and navigates me to anywhere I want to go. Connects to the internet. I order everything from food to rides with it. I pay the subway fare and gas by tapping it against a symbol. I'm writing this right now on it. I entertain myself for hours with games on it. I can make phone calls or have a live face-to-face meeting with 100 people at the same time. Unbelievable. Story 40. Computers, programming, and microchips are fascinating topics. It's amazing how we developed all this technology. Story 41. Writing is actually telepathy, and the fact that you can hear other people's thoughts across the vast distances of space and time is the crowning achievement of our species. Story 42. The computer has transformed our lives. We have gone from counting and computing on slide rules to using pocket computers in the blink of an eye. My great-grandmother began her life without electricity in her home, and when she passed, we not only had electricity but also the ability to use artificial intelligence in our pockets. Story 43. Cement. Do you know about the extremely high temperatures, unusual materials like volcanic ash, and the precise cooking timing involved in the making of cement? The Romans figured it out over 2,000 years ago. Story 44. Sewing machines. Old CRT TVs. Old hard disk drives. Optical drives. The sheer audacity of the synchronization required for these. Story 45. Microbolometer. There's no way that can work. On the other hand, I put my hand on a wall for 10 seconds, then went 10 yards away and used the microbolometer, and I could clearly see my handprint in detail. It is used in devices like ENVGB night vision goggles. They operate by measuring the temperature difference between a tiny wire that the infrared energy from the outside focuses on and a wire that is masked from the infrared energy. The heat of a body 500 yards away warms a wire in a sensor, and you can use the change in resistance of the wire to measure the temperature change and convert that to a visible image. Story 46. The blue light-emitting diode makes modern displays and LED lighting possible, but how we got there is truly mind-blowing. Story 47. Transistor. Not only is it a brilliant solution to a problem, but recognizing that it was a problem and that solving it would be beneficial was also brilliant. Story 48. The steam locomotive. Inefficient, about 6%, maybe 9% on a good day, compared to approximately 30% for a modern gasoline car, and incredibly labor-intensive. The average locomotive spent 7 months of the year in service and the rest in the maintenance bay. It had to stop every 120 miles for manual lubrication and was often swapped out every 400 miles for an inspection, with the train handed to a fresh engine. Additional crews usually kept it steaming while idle. Yet, under these schedules, the locomotives were tough and reliable. The maintenance routines were expensive but served to minimize the chance of breakdowns. They were the first means of moving loads of thousands of tons over distances that would have been inconceivable until then. They enabled a significant leap in living standards, making cities and industry possible in areas far from rivers or oceans for the first time in history. The United States operated its economy during World War II on railroads pulled by steam locomotives. If you get a chance, see the Union Pacific 4014 Big Boy locomotive. They run it all over the country, and it's hard to miss if you're within a mile of it, as it weighs more than a Boeing 747. That's the easiest way to visualize how a steam economy was possible. Story 49. Those giant Boeing aircraft, the 747 and 777, would fly over where I used to live. Even today, I wonder how something the size of a New York building could fly. Story 50. Commercial airplanes are often taken for granted. However, I am still awed every time I think about them. A machine the size of a large building, holding several hundred people inside, flying close to the speed of sound and covering what Columbus took years to travel in just 12 hours. It's such a miracle, yet it has become so affordable and common. Truly amazes me. Story 51. The bicycle is a machine that translates your effort almost perfectly into motion, allowing you to travel roughly 3 times further and faster than you would on your own feet for the same effort. The design was developed well over 100 years ago, and you can buy one for a few days' wages. If you told our caveman ancestors about it, they would be astonished. Likewise, binoculars are tiny handheld devices that allow you to see further. I appreciate simple, elegant devices that enhance our natural abilities. Story 52. To be honest, the whole concept and scale of using electricity is astonishing. I am an electrical engineer, and it still amazes me how people throughout history could conceive of all of this. From ancient Egypt and Greece to using transistors for computing to modern-day computers, it blows my mind every time I think of it. Story 53. A scientist at the university near me prints brain tissue. My mind has been blown for a year since I learned about that. Story 54. Air conditioning and heating. Can you imagine living in Florida or Boston without them? What a difficult life. Story 55. Microprocessors and everything that functions as a result of their creation. The thought processes that led to their creation are perplexing to me. Story 56. This may sound strange, but cameras, especially very early ones, fascinate me. It is incredible that about 150 years ago, we were able to capture a moment in time that can only truly be seen with our eyes. Story 57. The toilet does not require electricity. Sanitation has saved more lives than any medical invention. Story 58. String is humankind's second greatest invention after language and before the wheel. It is astonishing how twisted fibers can be so strong and how they have shaped the world. By string, I mean every size, from socks to wires to ship cables. Story 59. The lathe and the milling machine. You're telling me we can create machines that can produce parts to make better machines and so on? That's incredible. Story 60. Lots of things, but for me, it's global positioning system. I am one of those people who is terrible with directions. I joke that I couldn't navigate my way out of a paper bag. The global positioning system allows me not to worry when I'm going anywhere unfamiliar. There are several satellites high in the sky that send signals to tell me where I am and which way I should go. Story 61. Corn. Have a look at the wild hyacinths. It's amazing that my fellow human beings put so much effort over such a long stretch of time into such an unpromising plant. It's almost like it was chosen as a challenge, like a gamer beating a game on the hardest difficulty with basic equipment. Except like 10 billion times more impressive. Squash, beans, and potatoes were all available, but someone decided, nah, I'm going to grow this unassuming plant. And their descendants went on to build dozens of advanced civilizations based on it. If aliens ever visit Earth, they won't care about airplanes or submarines. When they learn about corn, they will be absolutely terrified of us. Story 62. The semiconductor consists of 2 materials that are not conductive. However, when contaminants are added during the manufacturing process, it becomes conductive under certain conditions which can be determined. We were able to miniaturize it to the point where thousands can fit in a chip the size of a grain of sand. Story 63. The written word is the ability to communicate abstract ideas and thoughts by marking symbols on a rock or a piece of paper. It is likely one of our greatest and most underrated inventions. Story 64. Computers. Honestly, the idea that we take different materials, compress them together, and encase them in plastic, allowing me to communicate with people on the other side of the world while using the restroom, is still amazing to me. Story 65. Running water is underrated because it is so common that we often forget how significant it is. Turn on a faucet and you have access to clean, drinkable water, even hot water. Just try to imagine your life without running water. It would not be impossible, but it would be much more complicated. Story 66. We invented God, and no matter how ridiculous it sounds, people still believe in him. It's insane to me. Story 67. A lot of people mention airplanes, but one thing that amazes me is how in World War I biplanes the machine gun fired through the propeller. I've heard explanations, so I understand how it works, but it still astounds me that it actually functions. On a related note, sewing machines. Story 68. This product is impressive, but Shazam is truly remarkable. The ability to hear through background noise, reverb, and different microphones to identify the exact song being played among millions of pieces of music is incredible, especially considering the similarities between songs due to the limitations of music. This is genuinely astonishing. Additionally, the process of smelting metals is something I still can't comprehend. I wonder how we even conceived of it, let alone executed it for the first time. Story 69. Just the thought process of the first person to try wheat and think of making bread. That is awful, but I think if we gather a lot of it, grind it up really fine, mix it with water and a little salt, then roll it out flat and cook it by the fire, it will be delicious. Story 70. Television. Let's send moving pictures through the air and have them appear on a screen in people's living rooms. Story 71. The toilet does not require electricity. If it were invented today, it would likely include a microchip and would need to be replaced every few years. Story 72. Artificial intelligence as a whole makes the simulation theory more compelling. How do we know we are not simulated characters talking some funny gibberish inside the digital sandbox of an overdeveloped interdimensional being? Or maybe an ancient cosmic entity is also a huge nerd besides being an eldritch horror. Additionally, large language models, which are far from being specialized artificial intelligence, let alone general intelligence, are significantly more capable and intelligent than about half of the general population simply by being proficient in statistics. Even some high-profile professionals have started to worry that artificial intelligence might be slipping out of control. Story 73. Vinyl records are sound waves etched into plastic, and a needle runs along them to pick up the recorded sounds. Fascinates me, and digital music seems more logical in comparison. Story 74. The steam engine kickstarted the entire industrial revolution and enabled the development of electricity. The concept is simple enough that one wonders why it wasn't invented much earlier, such as during Roman times. Story 75. The Internet. I understand how it works at a molecular level, and it is incredibly simple at its core. What amazes me is the amount of data transmitted, considering its fundamental mechanics. Story 76. Spaceships. At the beginning of the second millennium, we didn't know where the Americas were, and by the end of it, we were on the moon. Story 77. Smartphones are a combination of previously existing technology, but many inventions are. The computing power I have in my pocket, the instant access to knowledge, the communication capabilities, and the ability to capture excellent pictures and videos sometimes still amazes me. Story 78. Locks. I'll never forget being at the canal and looking at ships above me, thinking how we pulled this off. Even now, every time I recall that experience, I still get a sense of awe. Story 79. Hands down, artificial intelligence. I believe large language models are the most extraordinary piece of technology since the invention of the printing press. Story 80. Anything related to electronics, the transmission of television or radio waves, and Wi-Fi involves invisible signals that carry information. There are devices that can transmit and capture these invisible signals, converting them into forms we can see and hear. Story 81. We extracted minerals from the ground, applied electricity to them, and enabled communication between them. Story 82. MRI machines require a deep understanding of science and engineering for effective operation. Story 83. The Atom Smasher. When I was a kid, we took a field trip to the mile-long Atom Smasher. This large machine is designed to smash particles that are so tiny we can't even see them. Story 84. Gravitational Wave Observatory. We are measuring the warping of spacetime caused by two black holes or neutron stars merging hundreds of millions to billions of light years away. This event produces waves that propagate through spacetime and change the physical distance between two laser beams by 10 to the power of -21 meters, which is 1/10,000th the width of a proton. In other terms, it is comparable to measuring the width of a human hair across a distance of 4.2 light-years. This is another prediction of Einstein's general relativity, though he never imagined we would actually be able to observe them. Story 85. Cruise control on predigital cars from the 1970s and 1980s, phonograph records, photography, and motion pictures. Story 86. Recorded analog like on vinyl sounds so fascinating. Sound can create tiny grooves, and those grooves cause a needle to vibrate, which reproduces the sound. Story 87. Computer chips are complex and made at an incredibly small scale. The fact that we can use them to perform such intricate tasks, even though they operate as basic on-off switches, is impressive. Chocolate also exemplifies complexity. The steps needed to make it are intricate, but someone figured it out. They transform bitter cocoa beans into the most delicious sweet chocolate. Story 88. XRF gun. You mean to tell me I can point a laser gun at a piece of metal, and it will identify what it is made of? Okay, that seems like magic. Story 89. Photography involves understanding the mechanics, yet it still feels surreal. It is about taking real life, capturing a moment in time, and putting it on paper. Story 90. Those advanced tractors that fold up are impressive. I mean, a farmer must have been quite inventive to come up with designs like these. Story 91. Cheese is made from milk, and the process, particularly with ancient technology, may seem complex if you view cheese as an everyday item. The final product is something you can buy in reliable shrink-wrapped pieces at a grocery store, making the intervening steps appear normal. Look up Reddit if this sounds strange, and the same applies to other cultured or fermented foods. Someone was either incredibly curious or desperate enough to discover that something that went wrong could also be transformed into something enjoyable. It's always delightful to imagine that first moment of discovery. Story 92. Most electronics are impressive. Earbuds, in particular, are remarkable. They feature speakers, noise cancellation, and wireless connectivity. Additionally, they have touch sensitivity to perform functions such as powering on and off, as well as switching modes. That's a significant amount of technology packed into a device that is less than an inch long and weighs about 5 grams. Story 93. Radio is fascinating. The discovery that humans can use electromagnetic radiation to transmit information through the air is remarkable. Story 94. The forensic aspect of DNA is fascinating. A simple piece of hair can connect someone to a crime or determine parentage. Story 95. So many good answers, but the phonograph baffles me. I've read about it numerous times. I understand the concept from a high-level perspective, but it is astonishing to me how it all works and how anyone ever figured it out. Story 96. Computers. We combined materials to create silicon microchips that can process information. How does that make sense? Story 97. The road system. A decent city will have numerous cars moving to various places, yet it is not gridlock or bumper-to-bumper traffic. Somehow, that many people all know and follow the same set of rules. Story 98. Bicycles. Not only have we figured out how to build ones that work, but we can also ride them without falling over. The efficiency is amazing. Bicycles are the most energy-efficient mode of transport ever invented, including the calories burned while riding one. Story 99. CRISPR gene editing is remarkable. It astounds me that there are kits available for individuals to perform their own gene editing if they wish. I watched a documentary about its potential use for pest control. An island was overrun with rats, and over 60 years of using poison and traps had failed to reduce their numbers. A scientist proposed using a technique called a gene drive, which would allow the rats to live full lives while ensuring that most of their offspring would be sterile. Over a few generations, this would lead to the decline of the rat population. Unfortunately, the documentary concluded with a vote against implementing the gene drive by the local community. Although this isn't the specific documentary I viewed, gene drives were discussed in it. Story 100. That we can communicate complex ideas and emotions with vibrations in the air is almost unfathomable. Story 101. How to produce, capture, and use electricity. Without that, most of the interesting innovations wouldn't exist. Story 102. Chocolate. Someone figured out how to make delicious treats from a giant, slimy seed. Story 103. The phone in your hand is made of materials we extracted from the earth, including minerals and petroleum. Story 104. Modern processors use transistors measured in nanometers. The absolute precision required to manufacture them and the software needed to make them functional are essential. Story 105. Computers in general amaze me. They are the most versatile tools ever created. We use them to communicate, store data, analyze information, view entertainment, play games, shop, manage money, operate vehicles, conduct research, and run laboratory equipment. The list is endless, all based on electrical signals passing through various types of switches. Truly incredible. Story 106. The modern airplane. Imagine showing that to someone 100 to 200 years ago. They would never believe that something so heavy could ever get off the ground. Story 107. The electricity grid is an incredibly impressive piece of infrastructure. A device is making electrons move, and now I can simply press a button hundreds of kilometers away to control various functions. It is truly remarkable. Story 108. The mechanics of a car include the engine, transmission, and various other components. This technology was developed just over 100 years ago and has completely reshaped modern civilization. Someone discovered that a small explosion can be converted into kinetic energy using numerous metal parts in conjunction with electricity. Story 109. Society. If it weren't for that, we would still be growing potatoes in our plots and hunting game to survive. It is truly amazing. I wish we could go back sometimes, but I really love my modern luxuries. Story 110. I have a rant about heart transplants. You're telling me that doctors can take your heart out of your body, potentially kill you, then take another heart from an already deceased person, put that heart into your body, patch up the little veins, close your chest back up, and then the new heart, which does not belong to you, starts pumping blood and brings you back to life? Story 111. Artificial intelligence is still in its infancy, but it is truly incredible. The ability to train an inanimate object without being able to explain how it learns something is astonishing. The internet is also remarkable. Transistors and semiconductors are similarly impressive. While everything makes sense logically, the way logic gates are combined to create a computer is amazing. Story 112. The speed at which our devices connect via the internet is remarkable. For example, when I am playing PlayStation multiplayer online and I shoot at someone, connecting a headshot from across the map requires precise timing. Here is what happens. I press a button on my controller. The PlayStation 5 processes that request. The data is sent to my modem. The modem sends it to the nearest satellite pole. The signal beams into space. It is transmitted back down to another satellite pole. The data travels across kilometers of wire through multiple suburbs. It enters their modem. From their modem, it goes to their PlayStation 5. Their PlayStation 5 registers the information. This information is then processed. Both of these interactions are displayed on both of our televisions within 0.003 of a second. This process occurs continuously among 64 players around the world. And this is just one game. There are thousands of these games happening at any one time. It boggles my mind how fast data travels. Story 113. Hollandaise sauce is quite the challenge, I must say. I've made it many times, but I always wonder about its origins and how it came to be. Story 114. Mathematics is a field whose origins are unclear. We do not know whether it is something we invented or discovered. Yet, we can use it to predict with pinpoint accuracy events that will occur in the future or phenomena that exist beyond the range of our senses. Almost everything we do utilizes mathematics in some form. Story 115. Global Positioning System. Once used to deliver warheads to Moscow in 30 minutes or less, it now helps your pizza arrive at your front door in 30 minutes or less. Cordless drill. Once used by astronauts, It is now in the hands of your neighborhood enthusiast. Wireless fidelity. Some Australians got really tired of cables and decided to innovate. Digital flight recorder. Inspired by an Australian who wanted to understand what happened before a plane crashed. Cochlear implants. Another Australian who was tired of repeating himself. Inflatable escape slide. Gets you out of the plane faster so you can be the first to share your video online. Spray on skin. A response to the Bali bombings. And my personal favorite, cask wine, also known as the goon bag. Story 116. The counterintuitive development of the understanding of quantum mechanics, along with the 5,000 years of scientific progress leading up to it, is the crowning achievement of the human race. Story 117. Microprocessors are fascinating in the way they pack countless microscopic transistors into a tiny chip. Story 118. Ballpoint pen. It is genuinely amazing, understated, and works on capillary action, which is quite magical. Story 119. The spirit level is essentially a pair of bubbles that allows you to ensure that objects are plumb and level to within 0.5 millimeters. Story 120. The common toilet is an exercise in fluid pressure differentials, gravity, and buoyancy. There is no need for electricity since its conception. It has a simplistic beauty. Story 121. Last night, I pressed a button on my wall, and the fire system for the house activated, followed by the fan about 20 seconds later. Suddenly, warm air poured into the entire house. It amazes me that I can press a button to start a fire and warm my whole home. I have similar thoughts about air conditioning during the summertime. Story 122. Language is the pinnacle of human cognitive ability. Most inventions arise from the capacity to comprehend others' ideas and build upon them. The concept of controlled fire could be considered an individual discovery, but without language, it would need to be rediscovered repeatedly. Modern technology is fascinating, but none of it would exist without the ability to communicate. It is ironic how challenging communication can be in a world filled with devices that enable interaction in any language, anywhere, at any time. Story 123. I am going to be a rather sad mechanical engineer and say bicycle. I do not cycle too much, but when I do, and I am cruising on the flat, I just think, this is crazy. I am not a terribly fit guy in my 40s, and I am going faster than the fastest sprinter in their prime, barely breaking a sweat. Story 124. To be honest, most of them. The one that really amazed me was the mixture the Romans developed to build bridge foundations. They placed it in the water wet, and the water caused a chemical reaction that turned it into concrete. Genius. Also, the theremin. It is an electric instrument that one plays merely by hand movements. It is fascinating. It was developed by a Soviet physicist. Story 125. This may sound silly, but hydraulics fascinate me. I work as a farmhand, and the fact that something the size of a couple of beer cans can lift 10,000 pounds is truly amazing. Story 126. Records are old technology, but it always fascinates me that they work. As a child, I would take a sewing needle, tape it to the end of a rolled paper funnel, and spin a record on my parents' unplugged record player. I would marvel at the fact that I could hear the music. It's magic. Story 127. Olives. How did people figure out that if you take this poisonous fruit and soak it in another poisonous substance for a day and a night, it becomes delicious and nutritious? How did that happen? I'd guess starving and desperate. But that's exactly the state where you're not in robust enough health to be experimenting. Perhaps a lot of people died for this information. Story 128. Smartphones. Every time I am disappointed that the future isn't as flashy as it was promised in the 1980s, I remember what a smartphone is capable of and how much it has changed our lives. Story 129. Combustion engine. It was the first time in history that something created by humans was significantly more efficient than its natural counterpart. Before that, everything else relied on equivalent water, wind, or animal labor. Story 130. Organ transplants. I donated my kidney to my sister, and I still find it strange. It is amazing but still odd. It has been 12 years since the transplant. Would people from the past ever believe that this was possible? Or would they have thought it was crazy to remove a kidney from a healthy person and place it in a sick person to help them get better? Story 131. Not a specific invention, but modern medicine, especially trauma medicine. Imagine 1,000 years ago during a battle for a castle. A soldier takes an arrow to the gut, which would probably be a death sentence. However, if there were a modern trauma center nearby, he could likely return to the fight a month later. Story 132. Games offer an entirely different digital world in many cases. It is astonishing how ones and zeros can create something like The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2. Story 133. I always found skiing and snowboarding to be hilarious. The fact that we have evolved to use boards of wood to recreationally slide down mountains is wild to me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.